Welcome to Data Democratization, Analysis, and Application. In this brief introduction, we'll cover a little bit about the course objectives, and you'll hear from the course instructors. The objective of this course is that by the end of these 15 modules, you will be able to understand, find, and gather data from many sources, and you will be able to use the tools available to turn that data into a usable picture to further your goals with whatever organization or advocacy group you may be working with. Now, before we hear from our course instructors, we're going to hear a little thought experiment that's going to help everybody get in the right mindset and frame of mind to help make the most of this 15-module course. So picture a young person sitting in a room with a window in the center of each of the four walls. They're wearing headphones, and their attention is directed at a device screen, computer screen, laptop. Now we know that this room is a public library in a location, a lot of commercial activity in a busy city. Outside each window, and invisible to this person, is an undetectable entity. One of those is a staff member from a nearby foreign embassy. One is an employee of a social media company. One is a scientist under contract with a natural gas company. And the last is a community leader and activist for social justice. So put yourself into each one of these roles and think about the data each perspective would be interested in and the purpose that data might serve. Now, the activist might want to know identifiable demographics to understand the racial and age differences amongst people most likely to be using the library space. Scientists might be trying to understand how much AI use is growing amongst this age group and this demographic, and how much energy use goes into that so they can plan and market to keep the natural gas company profitable. Now, the social media employee might be doing exactly the same thing with a slightly different goal in mind. But the embassy staffer might be gathering data to help their home government assess our nation's military readiness in the next decade by gathering data and information on the activities of people under the age of 20 years old. So open and equal access to the available data is critical today because we understand the purpose of each observer is very different, even though the overall body of data remains constant. There's a very clear history of people and organizations using collected data for biased and skewed purposes, especially when the collected data was never made available for independent research. Informed communities are armed communities with the tools to defend themselves from malicious purposes of self-interested entities. Someone like the scientist could easily choose to present only parts of the data to help the natural gas company because they pay him so that they can get permits approved and expand operations. That bit of data wasn't always available to the public. So, with that frame of mind, let's go back to the introduction and hear from our instructors. My name's Tommy, and you will be hearing from me throughout the process of going through this course. And my background is a lot of experience with different forms of data and these tools that you will be introduced to throughout this course. I was a signals intelligence operator and analyst for the United States Marine Corps. I was a geospatial metadata analyst in those roles for the Marine Corps as well. I was also a formal instructor and a curriculum developer. After that, I also worked as a geospatial metadata analyst and a mission manager for the National Security Agency. I have many years of experience using these tools in a couple of different aspects from the government side, but I was also an investigative journalist once I left the military.
And I'm Tanya. For over 18 years, I have served as the executive director and public face of a water-focused grassroots advocacy organization. Data, access to it, and understanding it is key to my line of work. In 2022, I helped create Know Your River, a water-focused data democratization site that is changing the way our community is able to access and use publicly available data, combine it with citizen science to protect themselves and the community.
So who, what, and where is data? So data is the plural form of the word datum. Data are facts. Data are statistics. So you hear it talked about in that way, but you also hear it mostly referred to in the collective noun kind of sense and structured as data is. So either is technically usable in English and is correct, and you'll hear it used interchangeably throughout this course. So data is facts and statistics collected together for reference or for analysis. That can be point data that's out there, something as simple as the date and the temperature and the time, or something more free form that needs a little bit more analysis. And we'll get into some of that free form data later on. So data is everywhere. It's crucial because it helps us make informed decisions and understand patterns in our world. You can see things in the background upon analysis, right, that you couldn't otherwise see. So it tells us about how people behave on a broad sense or even on an individual basis, patterns of life, preferences, things like that. So by accessing and analyzing data, we can uncover trends, and that can inform everything from policymaking, research, business practices, marketing, all of those things. Data is a critical component to highlighting historical and ongoing inequities in society. So data is a very powerful tool that can paint a very clear picture in very, very tangible terms about concepts that have largely been intangible for people in the past. Whenever we talk about redlining, whenever you talk about the laws and the things that the civil rights movement was fighting, in the 60s and 70s that divided our communities racially, those things are provable, demonstrable in data analysis in ways that they weren't before. And so through this course, talking a lot about data democratization, the making publicly available that data that helps people to show that, that's a really big part of why this movement came to be.
What is data? Brought to you by the University of Houston Libraries. We hear the word data all of the time. It is collected, analyzed, shared, hacked, bought, and sold. But what exactly is data? Data are collected observations or measurements represented as text, numbers, or multimedia. When we think of data, we may immediately think of numbers, but data can also be field notes, videos, audio recordings, photographs, documents, and transcripts. What you consider to be data will be different depending on your area of research. For example, if you're researching the impact of wildfires on national parks, your data may be satellite maps and images. But if you're researching graduation rates of college students with faculty mentors, your data might be the number of graduates each year and the amount of time taken to earn their degree. Data will be different based on what you study. Data can be broadly categorized as qualitative or quantitative. Quantitative data can be expressed as a number and counted or compared on a numerical scale. This would include such things as rating scales from surveys, temperatures observed, or measurements gathered. It could also include things like counts of words used in a book or the number of attendees at an event. Qualitative data include things like textual descriptions of events, maps, pictures, or transcripts. There are other ways to categorize data, but most fall in one of these two broad categories. Data are not the same as statistics. Statistics are the result of data analysis and interpretation, so be sure not to use the two words interchangeably. Analyzing and interpreting data can help you identify patterns and trends, offer solutions to complex problems, or better understand scientific phenomena. Data are powerful aids in our attempt to understand the world. If you want to learn more about finding, accessing, and using data, visit the UH Library's Finding Data Guide.
So in that video, you heard her reference statistics, and specifically the difference between statistics and data. Statistics is information. Information is derived from analysis of data. Information is more broad than that in the larger sense of the word. However, in the way that this course works, you'll hear the word information, and that's specifically how you hear that in relation to data throughout this course. So, well, what about its power? What is it capable of? What can you do with it? Well, data provides critical insight that informs policies and initiatives. It leads to more targeted interventions and improved outcomes for communities. It works very similarly in a broad sense for the business side as well, and we will cover that in the next module. But it has a similar function with slightly different motivation, you could say. So that's one of the key things to keep in mind. Every individual, if you go back to the very first thought experiment in the introduction, every person has a different perspective, has a different interest. And she mentioned in the last video, data changes based on what you're studying. So that's part of the power of data democratization, is that it gives every person, every perspective, access to the same things, but they may be able to pull out different correlations and may be able to pull out different perspectives and things that we weren't able to see before. And having all of those different minds look at that data in different ways, we can learn a whole lot more from a very, standardized set of collected data and get a much better information picture on this side. Policymakers, grassroots advocates, and movement organizations, whether that's a nonprofit organization, you might, churches or youth groups, something like that. They can all use data to analyze and advance policies, to advocate, to lobby, to do those things. And we're going to move to another video here really quickly. And this is a pretty good one, so you'll enjoy this one.
What is the difference between data and information? Data and information are related concepts, but they are not the same thing. Data refers to raw facts and figures that are collected and stored, but have not yet been processed or analyzed in any way. For example, data could be a list of sales figures, the temperature readings taken at regular intervals, or a set of survey responses. Data is objective, unprocessed, and meaningless until it is organized and given context. Information, on the other hand, is data that has been processed and given meaning. For example, a report on sales figures that includes trends, comparisons to previous periods, and projections for the future is information. Information is subjective and can be influenced by the way data is processed, organized, and presented. Data is the starting point for creating information. Data can come from a variety of sources, such as surveys, experiments, transactions, and observations. Data can be quantitative, meaning it consists of numerical values, or qualitative, meaning it consists of non-numerical values. Data can also be structured, meaning it is organized into a well-defined format, such as a database. Data can also be unstructured, meaning it is not easily organized into a specific format, such as text from a social media post. Information, on the other hand, is data that has been processed, analyzed, and given context, making it more meaningful and useful. The process of converting data into information involves several steps, such as 1. Data collection. The first step in creating information is to collect data. This can be done through various methods, such as surveys, experiments, transactions, or observations. 2. Data preparation. The next step is to prepare the data for analysis. This involves cleaning the data to ensure that it is accurate, complete, and consistent, and then organizing the data into a format that makes it easier to analyze. 3. Data analysis. After the data is prepared, it can be analyzed to identify patterns, relationships, and trends. This can involve statistical analysis, machine learning, or other methods. 4. Data interpretation. The final step is to interpret the data, and present it in a way that makes it meaningful and useful. This can involve creating reports, charts, graphs, or other visualizations, or summarizing the results in a written report. In summary, data is the raw material, while information is the processed, organized, and meaningful result of converting that data into a useful form. By transforming data into information, we can make better decisions, understand complex relationships, and communicate insights more effectively. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.
Alright, and during that presentation in that video, you heard them mention structured data under the qualitative data bucket. You'll hear the term also freeform. Freeform and unstructured mean the same thing. There's a little bit of variation between proper Queen's English or American English and some of those verbiages locally, but the interesting thing to also keep in mind is that in that free-form or unstructured data, a lot of times it can start off as information and you reverse the process. So you take a list of tweets or social media posts and you summarize or pull out key concepts that happen to either go by a theme or however it's organized, and you pull those things out and you essentially reverse the process and create the data points from some posted information, and thereby making it useful in a form that can be used for analysis. So data is very, very influential on decision making. It can anchor an entire presentation. It can give some very, very substantial backing to either difficult to believe or maybe controversial topics or something of that nature. Data-driven decisions result in more effective responses to social challenges, maximizing resources and impact for Black communities and other marginalized communities as well. The lack of data-driven decisions can often lead to unsustainable and unjust outcomes in society. Another important caveat to that is it's not always a lack of data-driven decisions, but oftentimes a manipulation of data to elicit a particular decision that is most dangerous. And we learn a little bit more about that and go into that a little bit deeper in the next module. Analyzing data allows for evidence-based solution. It helps create targeted interventions that address specific community needs and can promote equity. Far too often, data analysis training and skills are not reaching children in marginalized communities and in communities of color and in lower income communities. Many programs, like the one in the next video funded by National Science Foundation, they're really trying to change that narrative. And that narrative exists across the board. Whether you're talking about access to the training and the skills in the data and data analysis realm, or anything else. And you can use that data, right, to pull that out and to show the inequities in access from, this school zone to this one. And that is actually part of, you hear the debates about school vouchers and school choices and those things. And that's something that's been used really, really heavily in the fight for justice and for equity in the educational realm.
The world today runs on data and information, and we use statistics to understand and learn from that information. In addition to the growing numbers of jobs that require data skills, statistics and data science help us make sense of issues that impact our everyday lives. Yet we know that in thousands of schools around the country, many students avoid learning statistics or don't have opportunities to learn statistics in ways that are relevant and meaningful. So we launched the SDLC project to develop curriculum modules that focus on social justice issues to increase interest in and understanding of statistics, particularly among students from historically marginalized groups, such as Blacks and Latinos. Research has shown that examining the historic and current conditions of varied groups in society can be particularly compelling for members of groups that continue to struggle for equal access to social and economic opportunities. We've created 2 prototype modules specifically targeting non-advanced placement high school mathematics and statistics classes. One focuses on investigating income inequality in the U.S., and another on investigating immigration in the U.S. In each module lesson, students enact a cycle of the data investigation process, addressing questions such as, how have incomes of higher income and lower income individuals changed over time? How much income inequality is there between males and females? Is it true that most immigrants aren't educated and don't learn to speak English? To answer these questions, students examine data using CODAP, a free data analysis tool that allows students to visualize and interact with data. Our project has added a portal to CODAP that allows direct access to data from the U.S. Census Bureau to investigate patterns in society, like trends in individual income, employment, and education levels by race and gender over time.
These 2 modules, seeing how effective they are with students. They're challenging, they're engaging, and I think that students want to engage with topics that are real to them, that are important to their community, to their families, to themselves.
This was never interesting to me before. That's what's funny. Because back then, statistics was just boring to me. It was just a problem in front of my face, trying to solve it, boom, done. That's it. Correct answer, 100. Well, this one is making you break down even further and further, deeper into the problem, and still be able to find a different solution for every single type of problem. That's what I like a lot about this.
We aim to build on this promising work by creating more materials and supporting more students and more teachers in developing critical data skills by investigating social justice issues.
Programs like that are certainly helpful in getting the data that's out there. The more minds involved, the better. The more perspectives that we have, the more angles we have to analyze and find trends and find common things and find strength and unity in those that information that we can paint from that. One thing that data cannot do that is a major challenge for us going forward and is not something that's necessarily a part of this training, but it's something that I think is important to note because we carry it all with us in the background and in our understanding of things in the environment today in which we live. Using this data, using these facts to have a sound, a cohesive stance, a cohesive argument for change, for equity, is very, very important. But we also are faced with these challenges today where people don't believe in facts, and there are people who are actively engaged in misrepresenting facts and misrepresenting other people and their problems and the issues that face their communities. And they do this in a very effective way, even if it's not intentionally effective or intentionally manipulated in the conscious mind. The collective mind is very, very influenced by social media and these algorithms, and we'll cover those in an upcoming chapter. These algorithms that drive social media exposure for the individual user are based on data collected about that user, but they create disparities because you inevitably create echo chambers where people are only receiving information which is constructed. They're receiving information that's not necessarily founded in proper data analysis. So the more that we can advance this mentality, the more that we can advance data democratization and equitable access to this data, the better our overall information will be as a society as well. But that is a very significant hurdle in some cultural and subcultural context that that we will definitely continue to face, maybe for generations. That is yet to be seen, but that is a major obstacle that we have to deal with in today's environment. The data is perpetually collected, and by itself is relatively useless. It's something pretty amazing, like only less than 2% of collected data is ever analyzed. So 98% of what is collected somewhere, stored on a server farm at a data center, doesn't even get touched. It doesn't go through any kind of process. And that is a lot of potential information that we could use to better our society and to be advancing our goals. So there's a lot of stuff that's out there that you're going to be able to touch, that you're going to be able to tap into. And the opportunities are absolutely limitless. So like gas to an engine, data is the fuel that drives information and analysis. Learning how to access and use data is critical to understanding the world around us. So that's what this whole program is about. Well, there's a little bit of historical context. that we needed to include in here. Historical injustices, such as redlining and discriminatory policies, have created lasting economic and social disparities within Black communities. Data literacy can help those most affected to tell their stories and to do so visually. So that's the overall goal. That's what we will come to with the skills that you'll learn through this. You'll learn to be you're already change makers, right? That's why you're in this training module. But this will help you put it into a visual, kind of digestible format that other people can more easily relate to and they can see. It becomes more tangible and understandable, especially for those who don't see it, who don't live it, who don't have that experience. All the programs used in this course are free and open to the public. We use Google Drive, Google Sheets, and ArcGIS throughout the series. We used Prezi to create the visual slides and the video and those things. And the reason that we did that is to really stress the importance of data democratization. All of these channels, all of these software solutions are free and open to the public, open source. And that's a big part of, there's a mentality that comes with data democratization, and putting it into practice just continues to elevate the importance and the power of doing things in an open source kind of way. So the story we will tell. The practice of redlining led to segregated neighborhoods and limited access to home ownership and financial resources for Black individuals, perpetuating wealth inequity. So step by step, you will be building a story map. It'll describe the effects of redlining on one of America's oldest cities, but then you'll also take that data and those bits of skill and apply them to something that's important to you in your community. So this class is not only going to give you those skills, but show you how to use it in a way that is important and matters to you individually, something that you're already working on. These are things we've already gone over. We'll just do a recap, because understanding the principles of data collection and analysis, being able to access public data in a useful way, to pull, store, manipulate data layers, to build a map, to build and publish the story map, and to understand the best practices on how you can collect and store your own data. Those are all really, really central to the course, and they're really central to the concept of data democratization as a whole. So public data. Public data is more on the government side. Public data is available in many, many different formats and from very many different agencies on every little thing that the government touches, which is a lot of things. It's, healthcare, statistics, veteran suicide rates, all the way to water management, from the Bureau of Land Management, things, especially out in the Western U.S. The vast majority of this is publicly funded, so taxpayer dollars, and is open and free to the public. But there's a major caveat to that. While that is the case, navigating through the intricacies and the bureaucracy of the data storage, right, whether it's this website or this database or whatever, that can be a pretty sizable challenge. So while it's true that it is publicly available, we have a few tips and tricks throughout this course, where you'll learn to submit a FOIA, to submit other kinds of requests, and you'll see other tools that actually crawl through these websites and databases using machine learning to pull back affected data and aggregate it so that you can access it in a way that's actually functional. Access to that data plays a vital role in promoting transparency, accountability, and informed decision-making within communities. But that also applies to the transparency and accountability of the federal government. So that also gives us the ability to keep them honest, to call them on their white lies, if you will. It gives us the power and the ability to protect ourselves, and that's a skill that can't be understated. And that's very, very important in elections, which, as we know, are very, very important. In how resources are allocated, and how rights, access to even what is usually considered a basic fundamental right, how those things are decided. So these tools go far beyond just a limited scope, and the more widely we can encourage data democratization, the more powerful that those abilities and those powers become.
The government collects data on a wide variety of subjects: the economy, climate change, crime, healthcare, and more. Its findings help shape policies from your hometown to your state to the whole country and even around the globe. Your tax dollars fund this research, but most of us probably don't realize how we make use of that data every day. Let's say you and your family are getting ready to move. You want to start by doing some research on your new neighborhood. Who else do you visit? How do the local schools rank? So you look to government crime stats and education data. Next, you pick a listing you like and you drive over to take a look. If you use GPS to get there, you're actually being guided by federal data. If you check the weather before you go, you're checking federal climate data. If you get hungry along the way and check Yelp for a good spot to eat, you might see local government health inspection scores posted on the site. You tour the house and decide you want to make an offer. The seller can use data from the Housing Finance Agency to determine their asking price. Okay, so you're ready to buy. The Federal Reserve uses economic data to set interest rates, which in turn help determine your monthly mortgage payments. And if grandma moves in with you, federal data on the price of goods decides whether she gets a bigger check from Social Security. So even when you're not the one using the data, it could still have an effect on your wallet. It's hard to pinpoint just how much the government spends on data collection each year, in part because it happens across so many different agencies. But chances are, in this case, you're actually getting what you pay for.
So why accessibility and transparency in data are important? Public data promotes transparency, making information readily available to the public, which enables us as individuals and organizations to hold governing bodies accountable. Data collected and paid for by taxpayers should be available to inform decision making. Access to data means better informed decision making.
What is transparency? Transparency is at the heart of a well-functioning, cooperative international climate change system. In the context of climate change, transparency refers to the reporting and review of relevant climate information. The Paris Agreement empowers countries to limit the global average temperature increase to as close to 1.5 degrees Celsius as possible to strengthen climate resilience and ensure financial flows are consistent with these goals. The Enhanced Transparency Framework, known as the ETF, will demonstrate how countries are progressing towards these objectives to reduce emissions and increase removals, build resilience, and mobilize financial, technical, and capacity-building support, and highlight where they need further support to achieve their goals. The transparent reporting and review of information builds trust and accountability into the system. It provides a better understanding of climate actions, and it empowers countries to make their own, more informed decisions, to set their own meaningful targets, to inform domestic policies, and to attract needed financial, technological, and capacity-building support. Through the transparent reporting process under the ETF, countries learn from shared achievements on climate action and support, and build on the lessons learned by others. Regular reporting and review provides a better understanding of our collective progress on climate action and support needed and provided during the global stocktake. In addition, it encourages the global community to strengthen climate action and increase investment to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. Participation in the ETF is essential for parties to reach the objectives of the Paris Agreement while also meeting their own sustainable development goals. For more information, visit unfccc.int/transparency.
Data is inclusivity and equity. It means all individuals, regardless of abilities or circumstances, can access and use data. It promotes inclusivity and ensures that no one is left behind due to physical, technical, or other barriers. It ensures that access is there. That doesn't necessarily translate into the analytical side, to being able to have the skill set to operate, to navigate, and to create something on the information realm that is representative of, what data is out there. That goes back to that school initiative we talked about a few slides ago. Making sure data is both easy to access and able to be understood, which really is more about format. It's about not having an absolute mess in a database, but having something that's organized, rational, and something that can be parsed through. Machine learning does a whole lot of that for us, but it's really important on the front end that's organized well, so that it can be understood on the other end. In the Marine Corps, we had this saying about pretty much everything: garbage in, garbage out. So if it's not good going in, you're not going to be able to understand it coming out. Open data is accountability. And this is where that rubber meets the road advocacy organization, that's where that functions primarily. So we have historical data, things looking back in the past, right? Historical data keeps secrets. There are many components to understanding the present and changing the future, and we can use historical data to unlock those and tie them together. Transparent data policy. It allows for scrutiny and accountability, and it can show historical trends, historical records, to help show that there's pattern established. When data and its sources are clearly documented and accessible, it becomes easier to trace decisions, to understand methodologies, to hold individuals or organizations accountable for their actions or the conclusions that have happened in the past and that are ongoing. Being able to access data makes decision makers accountable for impacts their decisions have on communities. Sometimes that's retroactive, and sometimes it takes using that data to show what the impacts of decisions were, but using that historical data can say, this decision has been made before, we've tried this before, look what happened. Trust and credibility. Transparency builds trust among stakeholders. Trust is critical for enacting lasting policies. Communities should be provided with raw and analyzed data collected during any scientific studies performed on or within the community. This is such an important concept because in the past, you see medical teams come in, you'd see science teams come in, people will come in and do interviews, collect data, take soil, water samples from people's wells, from their yards, from their houses, their homes, and collect all of this data and leave, take it all with them. Nobody who was part of the survey, none of the people affected, had access to it. They owned that information that they produced from it, but they also treated the data like they owned it, when in reality, data democratization really is the effort to say the data is factual information that belongs to all of us, because that's the reality of the situation right here, right now on the ground. So that's a very influential driver that's often overlooked. So any data collected within a community should always be done in a transparent manner and should always be provided to the community for their own call to action if they deem necessary, especially in the cases of medical teams and science teams and these folks, because they paint a picture, but they're not advocating for the community. They don't live in those communities most of the time. They're not going to be the ones to go to bat if the community is, under fire, under duress, at risk. And so providing that to the people who are in the situation is absolutely vital. Open data is informed decision making. Accessible data empowers informed decision making at all levels, whether it's policymakers, business leaders, individuals making personal choices. Having access to comprehensive and understandable data ensures decisions are based on reliable information. Reliable information is very, very critical. Too many times, these decisions are based on information that has a bias built in, that has a motivation built in, that is, a selfish drive, a selfish motivation, an economic motivation that puts other people in jeopardy or takes advantage of them. And that's exactly what we are trying to solve, or at least affect in some kind of small, tangible way. Innovation and collaboration are central tenets. Accessible data encourages innovation and collaboration. When you can see what the problem is at the very smallest level. There was a young man in the video earlier that was describing how he didn't take much interest in math or these processes before, until he started to see the in-depth processes, the very building blocks where you could make a difference. And that's what open accessible data gives to people across many disciplines. It's used to advocate for change. So it empowers activists, community leaders, to support their efforts with that evidence. It amplifies voices and influences policymakers, and it gives them something tangible and concrete. That tangible and concrete element is very, very important. And not having that is something that has been used as leverage against Black communities in the past. Throughout this class, you'll learn how to use public data to map those issues, to put it on a visual, very understandable format. So you can show these issues that are in the community and actually tell the story, the real story, with that factual backup. In the community, you know what's happening. You know what's happening to your neighbors. You know what's happening to your friends, to your family. But this makes it so other people can't deny it. They can't shut it down. Evidence-based advocacy using data is important because it helps support arguments with facts and numbers, making them more convincing and trustworthy. But that doesn't mean that the people experiencing that in the community weren't trustworthy or convincing before. What it means is there was a bias against those people. There was something already in place that was impeding their progress and squelching their voices. And this reduces and removes at least some of that resistance. It allows advocates to show how policies or actions have real-world impacts, and that helps to influence decisions and bring about positive change. So it's critical that public policy be informed by good, robust data collected broadly. A lack of data can often translate into a lack of evidence, and projects and proposals might seem on paper to be worthwhile, or they might be presented as worthwhile. And oftentimes, when democratization is not present, people can manipulate that data to make it look better than the results are actually going to be, than what the outcome is going to be. And they can manipulate it so that their potential risks don't look so bad. And so a lot of decisions in the past were made off of manipulated data to create manipulated information, which inevitably leads to inequities, injustices, and abuses.
The risk of being wrong has real impacts on people, their families, and their communities. As someone who grew up in an inner city and benefited greatly from the work of volunteers, nonprofits, the church, when I go around this country and I see communities that still lack the resources that I'm able to have now in my life for me and my child, it is important to me that we're able to do everything that we can to find solutions. And I think data and learning and evidence is key to helping these organizations find solutions and for the government to target its resources where we know it's having an impact. I am very intrigued by the work of Crisis Text Line, which is why we have their founder and CEO, Nancy Loveland, here with us today. She's, to me, a great example of an organization that has reached scale through data. So not just using it as a tool or an asset of the organization for learning, but also bringing that learning and approach to the broader field.
Without data, all we have is anecdotes. And if we're only relying on anecdotes to make policy decisions, then we're not affecting the best policy decisions that we can. If we can convince more people to use data, to make it more accessible, to make it more readily available for a public audience, then there's only opens more questions, more research questions, both for policymakers to affect better policy, as well as for researchers to address more and deeper social imbalances.
For me, that's the end game, is that can every family in this country afford to live in a place where they can get their children a good education, find decent work, and enjoy a decent quality of life. And until we agree on some targets and some real measures, and then find policies to implement those, I don't think we can be successful in closing the income equality gap in this country.
So to restate all of these things in another way, and it might be reductionist and oversimplified, but I think it's important, is that what this process does, what data democratization can do, is not necessarily just reinforce telling of the truth, but is to cut down on the ability to misrepresent the truth. And that is an underlying tenet that I don't think can be understated in the end. So to bring this module to a close, we know data is everywhere. The government has a whole lot of it, from all the different agencies, from many different perspectives and many different professions, many different agencies, right? That provides evidence for information. Information should be decision making based on good factual data. There's a lack of access to data, and that access, is historical. And we, as a community of people, have to work to make that data accessible and to help develop these tools, these mentalities, so that the factual information is what is driving the decisions for tomorrow, instead of relying on assumptions like was done in the past. Open data is one of the best friends and allies that we can have in any of those efforts. Accessing and using open data to inform desired changes is very important to become an even better advocate and an even stronger influence as an advocate. You have a story to tell. Through this class, you will learn to tell it in a different way, using data to create visual maps and different representations of that story, to get that across to people and to break through those assumptions and those boundaries of doubt, and those distances of misunderstanding. So take a few minutes here at the end of this module. Identify the who, what, where of the story or the issue that you're really passionate about. If there was a question that you could answer with data and put it on a map, to put that in front of somebody, what would that question be? What would you ask? What would you want to demonstrate to somebody? That will come to be what you pull data about. That will come to be the map that you build. And at the end of these 15 modules, that will be the product that you walk away with. We finish here with a short quiz. And that is the end of Module 1.